Good day, fish tankers. In my last video, someone in the comment section asked to explain filtration. Now, thanks for the comment. I always appreciate new ideas. I thought it's more of a beginner thing, but I realize now after thinking about it for a while that filtration is one of the most multifaceted aspects of a hobby. It's something that we really like to nerd out on. Sometimes it becomes like a bunch of petrolheads bragging about their cars, but I'm going to try and break down filtration in the home aquarium in as simple and as practical a fashion as I can. So if that's something that you're interested in, please stick around. If you're an advanced aquarist, then it's no news to you. Listen a little bit, and if you think it's worthwhile, then please share it to a beginner who you think might benefit from it. Well, that's it. So if you want to hear about how we keep water quality in our aquariums through proper filtration, then stick around. Okay, so there are three types of main filtration, but in terms of the processes that needs to happen in our aquariums, and those are mechanical filtration, chemical filtration, and biological filtration. And biological filtration is by far the most important of the three. You can do without any chemical filtration, without any mechanical filtration, even as long as you have some biological filtration in the form, you're going to be fine. The tank might just not look so nice. But these are the main types of filtration. And by far, biological filtration is the most important. I'm going to leave that to the end. And then I'm also going to give you a tip that is essential to understand for aquarium keeping, for fish keeping success. It's a rookie beginner mistake that people often make. Now let's start with mechanical filtration. The function of mechanical filtration is simply to remove suspended debris, fish poop, uneaten food, plant bits, dust, all kinds of things that's suspended in the water column, to remove it from the water column so that the tank looks clean to our eyes. If you want to have that look that some people with their non-planted aquariums, especially like Malawi, cichlids, or maybe if you're having one of these high-tech planted tanks, that a very crystal clear look. If you want that, you're going to need proper mechanical filtration. Now, the function of mechanical media are the things that we put inside the filter to get the job done. We have various different types of filters. I'll get into that. But the media are the things that we put into the filter itself. Now, mechanical filtration needs to be as fine as possible, but without blocking the filter flow. Now, for me, I'm a bit old school. I don't think you get much better mechanical filtration than good old filter floss. It's basically, I think it's nylon, a type of nylon wool. It's used to sometimes stuff furniture as well. And that is, to me, still the best way of removing suspended particles out of the water. In the old days, we had them in little bubble up box filters. And I basically had a layer, some marbles in the bottom to keep it from floating, a layer of filter wool, a layer of activated carbon, and then more filter wool. And that kept the water very clean, to the eye at least. You have other forms of mechanical filtration. You get filter socks that you use in sumps. You get various fine filter pads that you can cut to size and replace. Or you can also use sponges. You know, the finer sponges will be more efficient at mechanical filtration. But that's mechanical filtration. It's simply to remove suspended debris from the water. Then we go to chemical filtration. Now, I don't have chemical filtration in any of my tanks. It's not essential, but it is handy for certain things. If you want that absolutely crystal clear water, like the fish are floating in the water, then in addition to mechanical filtration, chemical filtration can come in handy because it removes tannins from the water. If you have, for instance, driftwood, that you don't want that dark tank look, what do we call that, a black water tank. If you don't want to go for that look, then of course chemical filtration will remove that. If it's in a very smoky area like a bar, chemical filtration will remove that. And any sort of things that are not physical particles, that are more sort of things that stain the water, that yellowish colors you sometimes get in old aquarium water, that's what you use chemical filtration for. Now, activated carbon was always a go-to thing. It's relatively cheap and we've used it for years and years. I don't use it in my aquarium anymore. It is cheap, but you also have to replace it every 2 weeks or so. And the one thing that I do think activated carbon is very good for is if you had medication in the tank. Let's say you had a copper-based medication, as I did in one of my tanks that got a parasite infestation. Then activated carbon can be a very handy thing to remove that medication from the water. But that's the only thing I'll really use carbon for personally. If it was about getting the water crystal clear, then there's another product called Purigen on the market. Now that's a go-to product for almost everybody that I know to give you that crystal clear look. I don't really use it either, but my tanks are more low-tech. You know, I'm more about the natural look. But if you're in an aquascaping contest, for instance, you want the water to be crystal clear, I would say use Purigen. And Purigen is a lot more expensive than carbon, but on the long run it works well because you can recharge the Purigen by leaving it in a bleach solution and then washing it out. The instructions will be on the packet. There's also a product by Dymax that does the same thing as Purigen, more or less. It's a bit cheaper, but we find here in South Africa, and I know in America you have various different ones. But that is chemical filtration. So now we've covered mechanical filtration and chemical filtration. The third one is biological filtration, and that's by far the most important thing. People say my fish tank is clean, it's crystal clear, but the fish are dying. How can that be? Clean for a fish is not the same as clean for us modernized humans in our brick boxes in our modern home. We want to be able to have a floor crystal clear. That is clean to us. That's not clean for a fish. We like our tanks to look like that maybe, but the things that you don't see in the water, ammonia and nitrite, those are the things that will kill fish. There's a lot of different ways to do things in this hobby, but this thing is true for right through the hobby. No matter what you keep, ammonia and nitrite kills fish. That's a given. You can take it to the bank, and that's what biological filtration are for. Now, biological media aims to have a maximum amount of surface area without being so fine that it clogs very easily with debris. You have to strike that balance, and there's many different kinds of biological media. These sintered glass rings, these bio rings that you find, those are the most popular. If you have a wet-dry filter like a trickle filter, you also sometimes get these bio balls, and you have various ball structure or a little tablet structure ways of biomedia. You can even use pot scrubbers, that'll work as well. And sponges can also make good biomedia. They can be used for mechanical and biomedia. Now, as water passes through that biomedia, through all that surface area, and the ammonia that the fishes secrete gets converted by bacteria into less toxic but still very toxic nitrite, and then finally to nitrate, which is NO3. You shouldn't confuse the two. Nitrite, NO2, nitrate, NO3. So that's a function of your biological media. It takes the ammonia and it converts it into nitrate. It's not the actual media that does it, but it's the bacteria that colonizes that media. Because there's water containing the waste going through that media, there's a lot of surface area on that media, and the bacteria over time attaches to that media, and that filters your water biologically. That same bacteria attaches itself to all sorts of surfaces in the tank, the glass, the leaves of the plants, and especially your substrate. That's also a biological filter of sort over time. But that bacteria takes time to develop. So you have to run in a tank first. A new tank doesn't have that bacteria. There are bottled products out there. Some say they work, some say they don't. My guess is they're all different. I've never used them, but I just run my tank in with established filter media if I put up a new tank. But that you need to take time to establish. So that is the different kinds of filtration with different kinds of filter media. Now, with biological filtration, you've got to remember also that all filtration, anything with a surface area, eventually turns biological. So even filter wool that uses mechanical media, in those little box filters that I ran when I was a kid, it's nice and dirty. It's got bacteria on it as well, and it turns biological. And then when I throw away all the wool, all the fish starts dying. When I only started changing half of the wool at the time, the fish started living. So even though it was all mechanical media and some chemical media in there, that mechanical media, the dirty filter floss, turned biological after a while. But it's not the ideal biological media because it clogs too quickly. So ideally, you should have in that order in a filter. First, it goes through the mechanical media, so that it takes most of the dirt that gets into your biological media. Then it's your biological media, and then finally your chemical media if you want that. And then you can even add some more mechanical media like fine filter floss at the very end, because that always clogs easily and you have to remove it first. Do you need all these different media types? No, you do not. The tank behind me, all the filter media in here, sponges. The tank on this side, all of it sponges, because the sponges do a okay job mechanically, and it also turns biological, so it also becomes a biological filter. My big tank downstairs, mostly sponges. There are some biological media in, like there's some Seachem Matrix, this is a kind of a power stone. And there are cheaper biological media, by the way, that you can use. You can just use lava rock. That's a cheap alternative. If the pieces are usually too big, wrap them in a towel, use a hammer, smash them up into smaller pieces. You can use that as biological media as well as other things like pot scrubbers, like I mentioned. Now, do you need all these different media? No, you don't. If you keep your run-of-the-mill sort of fishes, like I do, these are the biggest thing in there is a betta. There's slightly bigger fishes over there. There's some medium-sized tetras, diamond tetras, and rosy tetras in there. So a fish that's bigger than nano size, but still small size. And in the tank downstairs, the biggest fish is an angel, but there is some biological media, purely biological media in the form of Seachem Matrix. But if I take that space in the filter and I just fill it up with sponges, it will still be okay. So what am I saying? What kind of filter you use will depend on what kind of fish you keep. If you keep the sort of fish that I've just described, you know, sponge filters or sponge media will be completely all right on its own. If you're going to go with more messy fish, then you can have a variety of media, but it's really about having more media than what you have. So if you use these different kinds of media, you need a certain kind of filter. Now, the most simple filters are air-driven sponge filters. I don't see box filters around so much more, but it will work just as well. I would, just knowing what I do now, put some filter floss in with some biomedia, whether it's Seachem Matrix or crushed lava rock. That's how I would do a box filter now. Now, if you want a variety of media, canister filters, they're the most expensive. They've got a high filter capacity, and I think for most fish keepers, it's not really necessary. That's if you're keeping big fish like discus or South American cichlids or just malavis, things that really make a big mess. Or if you just want to be able to have that media variety, that can work well. When you have hang on the back filters, they're also very good for different kinds of media. The mainstays in the hobby are the Seachem Tidal and the AquaClear. Both have their pros and cons. I'd stay away from those hang-on backs that have cartridges. Use one where you can change your media. Now, those are the different kinds of filtration, and it's really up to you. In terms of flow rate, the conventional wisdom, it varies who you ask. The pump, if you're now working with a water pump, you're no longer working with an air-driven filter. The pump must turn the aquarium water, the volume of the water, over, depending on who you talk to, between 3 times an hour or 6 times an hour. Now, I would say 4 times an hour, because the flow rate that you see in the box of that filter or that pump is for when it doesn't have any media in. That's how I measure it. So 4 times an hour, 5 times an hour is still okay. I think 6 times an hour, you gotta watch what kind of fish you keep, because flow rate produce water movement, and not all fish like fast water movement. Bettas, for instance, don't like fast movement. So that is the different kinds of filter media, and that is the process of filtration. So, as I've said, all my filters, almost all of them are sponges. There's a bit of biomedia in a big tank downstairs. But my favorite filter media is sponge. I like a more coarse grain of sponge. You can have a finer one, but it clogs quicker. You need to wash it more regularly. Now, what is the big thing that you must never do with your filter? It's this, and this is important. If you can get this into your head, you will be successful. The biggest mistake that beginners make, in my experience, they clean the filter, they throw away all the cartridges. That's why I don't like cartridges. Or they throw away all the filter media, change it for new filter media, and then everything dies because you've taken out your beneficial bacteria that converts the ammonia to nitrate, and then even though a tank is crystal clear, you have an ammonia spike and all your fish die. So when you clean your filters, you can, if you have a combination of mechanical filtration and biological filtration. Sometimes if I want to polish my water, because sometimes the water out of my tap is kind of murky, on my hang-on back there's a layer of sponge, that's mechanical. Obviously it also houses beneficial bacteria. And then there's a bag of matrix. Then I just put a layer of filter floss on the top of a hang-on back because it clogs within a day. Then I can just take it out and throw it away. But then there's still bacteria on that bag of matrix. So when you take your biological media, or if you only have one kind of media, if it's only a sponge, when you clean that, you clean it in the dirty tank water that you take out of a tank. You never ever throw it away. If a sponge or a filter media is in such a way it's no longer serviceable, you cut it in half, you replace half of a new one, or some of a media with new media, and then you go. But you never ever throw everything away at once, and you never ever wash it under the warm water tap, to get it clean, because clean is nice, boss. If you do that, you're going to destroy your beneficial bacteria. We tell beginners wash it in old tank water. You can actually wash it under the tap water as long as the tap water is cool and not hot. But to be safe, wash it in the old tank water when you do a water change, because everybody's tap water is not the same. Maybe yours are like a swimming pool in the 80s where your eyes water from the chlorine. My tap water isn't like that. But always your biological media, whether it is pumice like matrix, or whether it is bio rings or just a sponge doing all the job, just wash it out and then you put it back in the filter. Never replace it all, never wash it under the hot tap. You have to preserve your beneficial bacteria, that is key. Your mechanical filtration, if you have different types of filter media in your filter, like that's a hang-on back usually, and a canister filter, some internal power filters, they also allow you to have some mechanical or chemical filtration. Mechanical and chemical filtration you can throw away as long as there's substantial biomedia in the form of a sponge or whatever else. But if it's only media, you can't. There must always just be that biological, that bacteria colonies you must preserve at all. Okay, here's another hack that I like to use with filtration. Instead of just one big filter for the tank's volume, I use two smaller filters. So you can see in another tank I have a small bubble up sponge filter, and then there at the back camouflage by a black background I have another small little power filter, mechanical filter. I find this works better because if you ever have to start a new tank, you can use one of those filters in the other tank and have a new one and replace it. Here in the big tank you can see there's a bubble up sponge filter, there is an internal power filter, and then there's a tidal 55 here. So I like using several smaller filters to get the filtration rather than just one. It just helps to have a bit of a backup, and that is it from me from filtration. There's also I maybe neglected, I mentioned canister filters, I mentioned hang-on back filters, I mentioned bubble up sponge filters. You also get these internal power filters. It's got a little water pump and it just pulls the water through a sponge usually. That's also a good filter if you're just keeping small community fish. Just make sure the flow rate is not so much that it blows them around and not too little. And also those sponges, clean them in the tank water that you take out, not under the hot tap, and never throw the sponge away. So that is key to remember. Always remember those things. Guys, if you find this information on filtration useful, please hit that thumbs up button. I'll greatly appreciate that. And what else can I tell you of filtration? I'm trying to think what I may have forgotten, but those are the basic mainstays. And if you remember that, you'll be okay. Now, the byproduct of your normal aerobic filtration in the end is nitrate, NO3. That only becomes toxic over the long term, not immediately with the fish kill over, but it can have long-term detrimental effects on the health when it reaches high concentrations. And that we combat by doing partial water changes, as I've mentioned over and over again. But the partial water changes depends on what your nitrate levels are. I think your nitrate levels shouldn't be above 25 ppm. I think the industry says 40 ppm. 25 ppm, no more than that. That is what works for me. My tanks, because of all these plants and the deep substrates, stay lower. It hardly ever exceeds 10 ppm, and I don't have to do a lot of water changes because I've got the deep substrates and the plants reducing the nitrate. You can reduce nitrate for certain specialized ways of filtration and substrates. Deep substrates help to reduce nitrate, as well as slow-moving plenums. That also helps to reduce the nitrate. It's a more specialized thing, especially the plenum thing. I've done other videos about it, and that will help you to do less water changes. But there's a caveat about it. It's a more complicated thing. Depends what kind of fish you keep as well. All of those things. So guys, that is a more specialized video, how to reduce nitrate. I did make a video somewhere in my channel, how to do less water changes. That sort of addresses that question. But that's it from me. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed. Thank you for all the comments, and thank you for sharing. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. And until I see you guys again, remember to take good care of those domestic denizens of the deep.